All right, everybody. So I did want to address quite a few things about Dissoi Logoi as well as the end of the year as we're kind of starting to get this picture of what the year is going to wrap up like. As you know, we have two significant projects that we're doing between now and what is it, May 28th or whatever the day is. We have our Dissoi Logoi and we have our English history project. And to an extent, you're working on them at the same time. And to an extent, we want to focus our attention on Dissoi Logoi. So as a way to look at this, let's go ahead and think about our time frame. So I do really want to give you as much time as possible to delve into research. So this past week has really been about fleshing out that topic, maybe starting to do some research and what all that's going to look like, and asking small questions and kind of getting some small answers and narrowing down to a topic. And so my hope is that today you have a topic. And if you don't have a topic, you really need to let me know. I am struggling to find a topic, or I'm stuck between these two, or whatever the case may be. I really want to know that so that I can make an appointment and work with you specifically on making that happen next week. Okay. Next week is our first full research week. So the idea is you have your topic and you're really beginning to use your class time as research time. And we are building an annotated bibliography. So again, my assumption is you know what that is. There are copies of annotated bibliography on Purdue OWL's page. It's a pretty simple document. It essentially has your citation, and then underneath your citation is a good size summary. You want a good 4 to 5 sentence summary summarizing what is in that document, because if you're spending 3 weeks gathering all of these sources, then when you come to write your essay, you're not going to remember all the details of everything. So it's going to save you a lot of time doing rereading, and it's also going to kind of ensure you that, hey, I do need to stop and read every once in a while. Maybe I'm going to go gather 5 sources and then I'm going to read them all. But you do need to stop and read as you're making your way through the research process so that you can ask better questions. So a little more details on the annotated bibliography to come here. The rough draft is going to be due on April 16th. I think that's a Friday. That's a Wednesday. So I'm kind of giving you about 2.5 weeks of research time, 1 week before spring break, another week after spring break, and then about half a week to have that annotated bibliography done. And then we have about a week and a half to write the paper, and then a week to do peer editing. And then we're going to have our final draft due on May 4th. There's really no additional time. I'm giving you as much time as I possibly can. That there's kind of a week in there that's kind of flexible. Do I want to be writing? Do I need to be researching? Research and writing are both recursive processes where you're doing a little bit of coming back to that idea. So you might need to be doing that in that week anyway. So I'm trying to give you as much time as possible. We're squeezing all the way down to the beginning of May, knowing that May is going to be full of AP tests and EOCs are somewhere in there. And map testing is going to happen again. Like all this other stuff is going on. And knowing that you're going to need 2 to 3 weeks to put together your final project. And we're going to be scheduling projects throughout. So, there's a lot of kind of how are we going to use this time where X number of people are going to be dedicated to this AP exam, and yet we want to finish the project in here, and then when's our AP exam, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to be flexible with that time, but I also don't want to extend any due dates past May 4th, because then we're really getting into a red zone where you're doing too many things and it's not going to work. So going into research, what we want to be doing over these next 2 weeks is thinking about where's my primary focus. So our focus is research and reading. So I want you to think about, what if I found a source a day? That's a super easy thing to do. Find a good source, read it, cite it, and summarize it in your annotated bib, and then no time at all. You'll be at the minimum 15 sources that I want you to have in your annotated bibliography. If you're learning more about this topic every day, then you're probably learning more questions to ask, and your research is going to get more robust. Likewise, if you want to find 5 articles on Monday and spend the rest of the week reading them and summarizing them, then that's not a bad plan either. What is a bad plan is trying to find 5 articles and read 5 articles in one day. That is not I mean, it's an okay plan if you do that Monday and then Tuesday and then Wednesday, and that's your pace, but it's not a good plan if you don't have the time to do that, right? So we don't want to leave that stuff for the end. We want to leave that stuff at the beginning and make sure that we kind of spread our time out a little effectively. So if you are having a hard time pacing yourself, finding one new article, reading it, citing it, summarizing it each day is a good pace for you. If you don't have any of those types of pacing problems, then chunk it out as you see fit. We are really still at the beginning stage of research. And so what does that mean? It means that each source should help you understand something about the topic. So I'll just give you some examples. I was recently talking to Paige, and we were talking about renewable energy, and some of the plans would be to do something like take mining operations down, teach those mining operations how to build solar panels, and suddenly we have a green tech industry that is going to generate the same amount of energy as the coal industry, and we can even sell those panels, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one of the problems at the heart of that idea is that the people that have been mining those mountains have been mining them for generations. It's a value system to those people. It's part of their understanding of what America is, to go into those mines every day, just like their fathers and their grandfathers did. And we can't just take away their culture. Like, that's a problem, right? Inside of that seemingly simple solution. And she was like, that really got me thinking about something else. So you have to start by kind of knowing some background information, and then you kind of go, oh, I had no idea this thing existed. Now I have to follow this question down a path, right? And so that's where you are right now. You're asking lots of simple questions. I was talking to another student about the federal minimum wage, and what are some things that we want to know if we want to argue either pro or con? Well, I would want to know how many people in America live in poverty. What's the percentage? What constitutes living in poverty in the U.S.? I believe it's making less than $20,000 a year. But what does that mean? I guarantee you, like, whatever you think $20,000 a year is, it's way less than you think it is when you spread that over a year and all the things that you need. And so just going out knowing, today I'm going to find the answer to this question is a pretty decent way to start the beginning of your research. Or what are the things that I need to know? Well, I want to find a source on this, and I want to find a source on this, and I want to find a source on this. That's a really good way to begin your research. As you gather all these little pieces of research, right? Think about them as bricks in the building that you're building. Each brick needs to be solid enough to hold its own weight and to hold the weight of the brick that's going to be over it, right? And so we want to go to the good sites. I would not go to Reddit to know what the federal poverty limit is. I just wouldn't. That's a terrible place to go. I would go to, let's see, I might look at the IRS because that might have that information, or I'd start there, and then I'd kind of look at what other government agencies might have that information. Does the White House webpage have that information? Maybe. So now I'm going through my organizations trying to look for that specific thing. When in doubt, use databases. Put those questions into databases, and you're likely to find them inside of an article. You're likely to find them, if you pop it into opposing viewpoints, you'll probably get a nice little chart somewhere that shows you like levels of poverty or something like that. Do good research like we've practiced all year, and run those small questions through it. Once you've assembled enough bricks, now you're ready to start shaping your argument. So this is, as we're finishing up our first stage of research, and now we can start looking at, well, what are the big questions now that I have to answer? How do I start to take what I know and shape it? And now you have to add the mortar, right? Like, you're the person putting the bricks together, and if you just stack them on each other, then it's not going to build a structure. You have to glue them together. So you have to start looking at, how does brick A with this piece of information work with brick D that has a slightly different piece of information and builds on it? How do I put these things together? And that's where you're kind of outlining. That's where you're really using your annotated bib. You might have to go back and do more research during this time. It's kind of a normal time to do that. As you're shaping your arguments, you really don't want to have two opposing arguments, this picture of these two cars that are in a direct path of each other. Because what you're going to end up having to do is you're going to have to argue directly against yourself, and you're going to have to think of arguments that don't contradict something that you're about to say. So I'll give you an example of this that I've seen in the past. I had a student who wanted to look at energy alternatives. Great topic. And instead of arguing that the future should be generally nuclear power, and then a different paper that said the future should generally be, wind and solar, it was, should we use nuclear energy or not? Like, that's kind of how it ended up being asked. And so he had to contradict himself in one paper by using information that either wasn't sturdy or using an argument that was impervious to a lot of faults, right? So we don't want to do that. We're going to end up with those problems. So I much prefer to think about like this 20-sided die. Like, there are all these angles and facets that even if you pick that 12, I don't know if you could see in the picture very clearly, but that 12 and that 20 are at different angles. And yes, they will collide, but they're not going to be directly competing for each other. And actually, I'd much rather use the angle of that 14 and that 12, which again will eventually collide, but they're gonna collide at an interesting angle where it's not going to be directly opposed to itself. So you can do all types of things with this. I've talked to some other people about, if you did like the Paris Climate Change Accord, and you said, we want these changes instituted so that the U.S. has a zero carbon footprint by the year 2030, that's super hard to do, right? Like, that's insanely impossible to do. So, maybe I want to have one plan that says 2030 and one plan that says 2050 and argue which one would be more effective in saving the planet, and maybe rationality is one of those things. I'm not suggesting that's a perfect argument, but that's a kind of argument that you can make that's at least still two-sided, as opposed to saying, climate change doesn't exist, which we've talked about doesn't have any supportable data behind it. As we get to the end of research and we're starting to really put the paper together, now I want to notice, do I have a source that's stronger than another? Do I have any weak sources on this annotated bibliography that I definitely don't want to get into the paper? Do I need to find that same information in a stronger source? That stuff is much easier to do as you're doing kind of the cleanup, but it's still really important work, right? Like, if I used Wikipedia at the beginning, which I've encouraged you to do, we're definitely not going to use Wikipedia in your paper, right? I don't even mind if it's on your annotated bib this time around, but I really don't want to see it in your paper. So that means, hey, if you got some good information from Wikipedia, you'd better find it somewhere else, right? And maybe it's right down there in the citation on Wikipedia, but half of the stuff on Wikipedia isn't cited. So I might not rely on that information. I certainly don't want to build a whole argument around it if I can't find a better source, right? And so some of that cleanup needs to happen early. Some of that cleanup can happen a little later. So I do want us to think ahead. Like I said, we're going to be doing research for the next 2.5 weeks, excluding spring break. I did not give you anything to do over spring break, nor would I, unless you are, behind on, let's say, your Gatsby essay or something like that. Then we don't want to do that. By the way, I think you have plenty of time to do like a revision on the Gatsby essay while you're doing research, right? Like you really do have the time to do that. As we start thinking about other things that are going to be coming down the pipe, well, we've got AP test. So I do want to start throwing some AP stuff at you during this process. One of those things will be a practice test where I need you to take about 2 hours of your own time to do that test. And so I want you to think about the week after spring break, how can I steal 2 hours of time? That might be relatively easy. It might be relatively hard for you to do. So kind of thinking about how can I make that happen so that I can practice the similar conditions to the test that I'm going to take. And then I can grade those and we can have some feedback. Your English history project. So aside from reading your book, you might want to get into your time period a little bit. If we were in class, I'd be playing songs from the 60s right now. And we'd have a little discussion over music from the 60s, and the next week we'd be playing music from the 70s. You might want to watch some documentaries. I think about just how important the O.J. Simpson trial was to the early 90s. And if you're reading about the early 90s, or if you're reading a book that takes place in the 90s that has anything to do with race, then you might really want to watch that 30 for 30 documentary on O.J. Simpson to just really understand something amazing about the times. I know it's like 7 hours, but 7 hours over the course of 2.5 months is not so bad. YouTube documentaries and those types of things kind of just get a sense of the time that you're working with is going to be helpful for you when you're putting together the English history project. And again, these are things that consuming media can be intellectual, but it's also should be fun, right? So both of those things. And so this is a way for you to use some downtime to also do something that will benefit you for school. Like use some downtime to just listen to some music from the 60s. It's not taxing you very much, but it might help you down the road when you're thinking about finding some songs, right? If you're going to be on YouTube watching, makeup videos, you might as well be on YouTube watching, a quick documentary about X, Y, or Z or something like that, or watching an old episode of The Jeffersons if you're doing the 70s that maybe you find on YouTube. Finding what are the popular movies, TV shows, Oscar winners, etc. of its time period, and catching up with some of those. That could be really, really useful. What are the influential films? Depending on your book, right? Many of your books have been made into movies. I would really suggest that you don't watch the movie of your book until you have finished reading it and you have made a solid opinion of it, because whatever movie has been made, it's been made with things in mind, right? It's been made with somebody else's artistic impression. So we want to be a little aware of that. And you don't want that to upset your understanding of the book, right? The book is still the project, not the movie. But movies can be really powerful after you've read a book, right? So those are important. I also think about some of you, like I think about Ellie, who's reading this, postmodern piece that's making fun of the genre of noir. And so, like, my recommendation to Ellie was like, watch some noir, watch some of these films that this book is making fun of, and the book will start to make more sense. So watching things that definitely had an impact on your book is going to help you understand, or watching things that your book might have had an impact is going to help you understand, right? I can't remember if somebody's doing Catcher in the Rye, but if you're doing Catcher in the Rye, at some point you should watch Field of Dreams, and recognize that one of those characters is actually supposed to be J.D. Salinger. So just kind of being aware that that project is coming and spending a little bit of your time doing those things. One series that I really like, it's all on HBO Max right now, is a CNN series of all the decades. And if you're doing the 80s, man, watching the 5 or 6 episodes on the 80s will really help you to understand something about the 80s, like a lot. It'll be very beneficial to you throughout the project. So this is very tricky. We are about to go into this, really 4-week period, 3 of which you're going to be researching and 1 of which we're going to have a break. And if we were in a typical classroom right now, you'd kind of be coming to class. I'd be asking you how things are going. I'd be sitting at tables with you guys. Some days we'd be kind of silly and we'd be talking about stuff that has nothing to do with this paper. Some days we'd be talking about college, which I always like doing. Some days we'd be, grilling the questions and looking at some of your research, kind of depending on what you need every day. And so we want to keep some of that connection. So what I want to do is make it clear that every single class time is available to you. I don't have a lesson. I don't really have many lessons that I'm going to do. And if I do realize, I need to do a lesson on annotated bib, this is something people are asking for, then I'm going to make a video. I'm not going to rely on everyone coming to class to teach that. So that's something that I want you to be aware of. You can come to any class at any time and kind of wait in line and ask questions. I do find it useful for 4 or 5 brains to be in the same place so that I'm asking questions of so-and-so and the person next to them is kind of like, oh, I get it. I see where you're going, right? That's kind of the way that this works the best, is in a collaborative environment, and it's going to be hard to mimic that. I do want to keep taking attendance for my purposes, so I do want to make it very clear. I want to see you a couple times a week. That's still important, but does it need to be for an hour a week? No, it doesn't. Just kind of getting a sense for where you are and how you're doing, chit-chatting, answering some questions. That's what we're here to do. And then, of course, I know all of you guys work at 3 o'clock in the morning. So if you need to email me, and I'll get back to you. We can do that. Maybe it's to email me and say, I have these questions, and I come back and I say, yeah, let's do that in a meeting. This is a lot of questions. Then I can help you in a different way. So that's just going to get us to the end of the school year. There's a lot going on. A lot of it is individually paced, and so I am worried. I'm not like upset worried. I'm just worried. This is a time where I don't have much control at all. You have all the control. For some of you, that's music to your ears. Let me go and do my thing, and you're going to do great. For others, you're gonna get floundered a little bit, flustered a little bit. That's okay, as long as you come and talk to me. If you shut me out and you don't let me know things are going wrong, then the year's just going to end. Time's going to run out, and we don't want that to happen.